Hello and welcome. I'm joined this evening by Brizer and Blackbird, and we're going to discuss the 2006 or 2005. I'm not sure which year exactly. I get different information depending on what website I look up. I think it's 2006 movie comedy called Idiocracy. So first and foremost, Brizer, you're very welcome. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good betwixt. Yeah, thanks for inviting me on again. And yeah, it's an interesting film, this one. Quite funny as well, and quite poignant considering where we are right now. And that this was made, what, 15 years ago or whatever, So, yeah, so looking forward to chatting about this one.
And I'm also joined by Blackbird. How are you, Blackbird?
Greetings, gentlemen. Thank you for having me back. Really looking forward to this one today. Idiocracy, this is another gem. And my understanding is it was released September 2006, but is set in the year 2005. Right. So, that's, I think, some of the webpages talk about being 2005, 2006. But anyway, looking forward to talking about this. I got several buckets of rocks here. I don't know if we'll get through half of it, but there's a lot in this film.
Don't break any windows. Don't break any windows. Yeah. 2000, you're right. It's set in 2005. So I'll give a very quick synopsis, and then I'll bring the lads in to give their two pennies. So we have two main characters. We have a guy called Joe Bowers, and he's played by Luke Wilson. And we have a woman called Rita, and she's played by Maya Rudolph. And the idea is Joe Bowers is working for the military. As far as I know, he's some sort of clerk. He has a very normal job, not very stressful. He likes his job. He likes being a normie. And the military have decided that he's the perfect subject to be cryogenically frozen. It's kind of funny because they show charts of how normal he is, and he's exactly like in the middle of every single metric. He's the most average guy in the American military. And Rita, the woman, she's a prostitute. I suppose they have to go to the private sector for the woman to convince her to be cryogenically frozen. So they're frozen, and it's supposed to be for 12 months, but they kind of get forgotten. Things change, and they wake up, or they come out of their coma in the year 2505, and the world has changed dramatically. You can see we get this montage of people's IQs dropping and dropping and dropping, nosediving. And in the year 2505, Joe Bowers is the smartest guy in the world. And I won't go through all the bits and bobs. The guys can bring up certain parts. But suffice it to say that the government, and it's very strange because although everyone is very, very dumb, they still have this technocratic state. They still have all this machinery and technology. They have electricity, they have TVs, they have TV channels, they have movies. So that's obviously it's a comedy, but it's kind of weird. So he decides to help the government. They want his services. They don't have water, and it's more or less like a desert where they are. And when Joe does a bit of sleuthing, he finds out that they're trying to irrigate the ground with a product, and he refers to it, I think, as Gatorade. But this product is called Brondo, and it's I'll get into this later, but it's a product that everyone loves. They think it's great, and for them, water is what goes in the toilet. They have no idea that you need to use water if you want to grow crops. But anyway, yeah, Joe stumbles upon this, and he decides to replace this Brondo with water. And unbeknownst to him, the Brondo Corporation or whatever, actually half of the jobs in whatever United States are given by Brondo. So half of the workforce are suddenly on the scrap heap, and they're going mental because they say this guy is supposed to be smart. We've all lost our jobs. So at the end of the day, he does save the country because he makes plants grow, and he gets rewarded. I think he becomes the president. He settles down with his female counterpart Rita. They have a few kids, and the kids will now be the smartest in the world. And now I will pass it over. As I said, there's not a very big plot here with this film. It is a comedy, and I should say that this is a film that passed me by because I generally didn't like comedies, especially in the early noughties. I never seemed to find them very funny, and I'm sure had I watched this film back in the day, I wouldn't have found it funny at all. And I missed the message thereby. So it's many years later that I watched this, and I realized that behind the slapstick humor, the toilet humor, etc., there is a message, and there is something to rake through. So I forgot to mention as well that this film is directed by Mike Judge. Now that name should be familiar to a lot of people because he was behind some animated series such as Beavis and Butthead. I'm sure a lot of people will remember that. Pretty brain dead stuff. And he was behind King of the Hill, so Hank Hill. Now I will pass it on to Brizer to give his thoughts, and we could go anywhere with this. We could go down any sort of rabbit hole. And towards the end, we might talk about the idiocracy within which we currently find ourselves. So over to you, Brizer.
Yeah, I've watched this film quite a few times. I think I first watched it probably 2012, 2013, around that time. Someone told me about this and said you need to watch it. It's funny and it's slapstick and all that, and it is. I have to say, it is very funny in parts. There's a lot, you laugh out loud at a lot of stuff that goes on in this. So I think it's kind of well done in that way. But there is a serious message behind it all, and as you say, it starts off with the Bowers. He's just this normie who works in the library in this military base, and he's asked to do this. Well, he's not asked; he's been told you have to be part of this new experiment, and he didn't even know what the experiment was, And Rita, who's the prostitute, who's also part of the experiment. They don't know each other or anything like that, but he thinks that she says that she's an artist, and he says, oh, so you do painting and all that kind of stuff, That's just kind of how normal he was. He didn't even think that she could be a prostitute, And so anyway, they're put into their cryogenic chambers, and but before all that was happening, well, when they were organizing this with the military, the generals and whoever who was behind this experiment got involved in a big scandal involving Rita's pimp called Upgrade, right? And there was a big scandal erupted over it, and they had to knock down the military base. But of course, they forgot about Bowers and Rita, who were still stuck in their chambers, and they built a big supermarket, like a big Walmart type. I can't think of the name, but there was lots of funny names of different places, and which you can kind of see nowadays, all these big corporate stores and everything that you see. And anyway, they wake up, and Jack Bowers wakes up in this living room of this guy who's just watching TV, and he's just a complete idiot, right? And he still thinks he's back in 2005, but he's in 2505 or something. It was 500 years later. But he doesn't realize that yet, and he's trying to figure out where he is and whatever. And there's this lunatic sitting in front of a TV who's just laughing at absolute nonsense on the TV. It's kind of asked, like, what's going on here? Where, I need to go back to my military base. How did I get up here? How did I end up here? I think he knew he was part of an experiment, but he thought, I need to get, something went wrong. I need to get back to my base and see what happened. And then, of course, he starts realizing, he looks at dates and he sees it's 2505 and he's kind of, that must be a misprint or whatever. But then he keeps seeing that date again. He thinks, my God, I'm 100 years ahead of where I was. And then he starts looking around at the society he was living in. And as you said, it was just a world populated by idiots, hence idiocracy. And then I suppose the kind of adventure begins, because he does realize, well, I have to try and get out of here. And then he meets up with Rita eventually, and she's obviously trying to figure out where she is as well. And of course, being a prostitute, she thought, well, I can, maybe make a bit of money out of this. And she realized again that there's idiots around her, and she starts leading this guy on, says, I'll put you on a timer, I'll come to you tomorrow, but I'm charging you by the hour, so you got to come back to me and whatever. And so she's, cleaning up, but then she was even looking at the money, the notes and everything. It was all this crazy stuff on the dollar notes and everything, and she was like, what the hell is going on here? So they kind of eventually start figuring things out, and that there is some kind of crazy world. It's like they've woken up into some kind of dystopian type of nightmare, but it's not scary. It's just, again, full of idiots. And again, you have to wonder, like, the world that we're living in now, we have to wonder, are we there? Are we in idiocracy right now? And again, was this movie, again, predictive programming, telling us that this is where the world is going? And as I said, 2005, so that's what, nearly 20 years ago now. That, and here we are. And sadly, there is a lot of idiocracy going on, and it's only getting worse. So, I'll hand it over to Blackbird now and see what he really wants to take it from there.
Oh, great points, both of you, on the storyline. And, when I saw this originally, it was at about the same time I was really becoming aware of the Cloward-Piven plan and the Kalergi plans. And it's interesting that in 1923, Richard Kalergi would write the Pan-Europa manifesto, declaring that the man of the future will be a mongrel race of brown people of low IQ that can be easily led by a royal Jewish world government, right? And so this is what he was writing about in 23. And then, and also in 1923, Edward Bernays would publish Crystallizing Public Opinion. And the parts where they're talking about Brawndo has what plants crave. It has electrolytes and waters from the toilet. That is right out of the Pavlov conditioning that Edward Bernays used in Crystallizing Public Opinion. It's basically repetition, repetition, repetition. Don't allow anyone to challenge anything, and you get everyone parroting everything back in these circular logics, right? They don't understand any of it, but they're telling you what they've been taught. And then in 1923 is when the Frankfurt School was established, and that was just basically rolling this out. This is the future, and we're going to destroy all of the civilization and leave this destroy everything, and then we'll build up a new world order out of the ashes. And it was 1966 when Andrew Cloward and Francis Piven wrote the Cloward-Piven plan about all this immigration will just completely destroy the economy, cause rapid inflation, rapid welfare. And, it was fascinating to see the economics of this place where you know, hyperinflation, just like in the Weimar conditions where your money is worthless. His doctor visit when he first gets there is like $5 billion. And one of the things he's being tracked down for is he didn't pay his doctor bill of $5 billion. The notes that the prostitute is getting, you know, it's interesting. She's able to immediately adapt. You know, the hero, he's having a rough time sorting all this out. She just goes back to work, right? She can work anywhere. It's kind of an interesting twist. So you just see this, you know, Cloward Piven plan, Kalergi plan, and the propaganda of this total authoritarian police state that is going to be required to contain a society built up with this type of people, right? And so you go and you look at who gave us this work, and it's interesting when you go back in all of these American satirical works. They call it satire, but it's just really this Marxist dystopia, contempt for everything about Western culture that's under the guise of comedy. And you see Matt Groening, who, you know, we know him from The Simpsons, but he actually had a earlier comic strip that was in all the Jewish alternative media everywhere called Life in Hell, and that's debuted in 1977 to 2012, and from there he started The Simpsons in '89, and it's still going, and The Simpsons should just be called The Stupid Goyim, right? And it's interesting that, you know, Matt Groening is big friends with Jeffrey Epstein, had been to Jeffrey Epstein Isle, you know, many times. So he's in this inner circle of Hollywood. He also did Futurama, which is a dystopian future, 1999 to current year. And so you look at him, he's the one who got the Simpsons thing, and you see that Mike Judd, he was famous for Beavis and Butthead 1993 to 1997, and now there's a current Beavis and Butthead, and also King of the Hill 1997 to 2010, about, you know, these average white guys that used to run the town that are now being overwhelmed with progressive values in Arlen, Texas, right? So you see this type of, you know, just nothing but contempt of white culture in the guise of comedy. And then he did Office Space in 1999, and then Idiocracy in 2006. And the other person I found most interesting in this is actually, I want to talk about the producer. This is produced by Elisa Dutton. And what's interesting here is she's, you know, of course, a chicken swinger, graduated Brown University in art, you know, and she specializes in doing things like children's programming on Netflix, right? So she's all about putting these same dystopian values under comedy into children's programming. She's the one who produced this. But I found the most interesting character in all of this was Eaton Cohen, who is an Israeli who did Idiocracy, Tropic Thunder, Madagascar, Escape to Africa, Men in Black 3, and The Bad Guys. And he is a hardcore Chabad Lubavitch kind of guy. He is completely observant. He has his Jewish family, and he has ties to all of this Israeli intelligence apparatus, right? And so he's writing this, you know, movie that's right out of the Talmud of just how much contempt they have for white culture. And so this idea of, you know, the heroine, you know, the female counterpart has to be a prostitute, right? You know, the hero of the story is the most average white guy ever. And then in the future, all people care about is watching, you know, pain porn on television and eating goy slop, buckets of goy slop, right? And also, I think the interesting thing was the most dangerous character was a unscannable person, somebody that didn't have a tattoo, that wasn't part of the system. And when the hero Joe is exposed as being a non-scannable, everybody freaks out, and there's report him and etc. And the last thing is they're looking for the time machine to get back to their own time. So the whole quest is about them getting to this time machine so they can get back. And at the end of the movie, you find out that the time machine's actually just a bad carnival ride that's talking about, of course, Hitler and the Nazis and the big thing of World War II, and then how the UN, or the UN, as they referred to it, came in and fixed all the world's problems so that Hitler and the Nazis could never rise again. And that was the, whole thing of the time machine ride. And then, of course, at the end, you have the white guy, having children with the non-white woman, and they're the smartest people on the planet. And his vice president, of course, is having 32 children of the dumbest kids on the planet. And so it's just the cynical look of, these stupid goyim just are going to, breed themselves out of existence. So that's the cynical Chabad Lubavitch take, I guess, on this, that justifies their complete contempt for us. And they put it out there as comedy. Right. And that's what gets me, is just, this, Jewish guy. If I wrote a screenplay describing Jewish people in any of these terms, it would never see the light of day. Right. But, this is, won awards and all kinds of stuff. And it's a cult classic now. So anyway, I guess that's my original 2 cents worth.
Excellent points from both of you. And I'm going to go into a few things here and a few things that Blackbird has mentioned. So yeah, they've more or less concentrated, the smartest people, the smartest scientists, instead of trying to solve the food crisis, improve agriculture, their focus is on hair, people losing their hair. So kind of aesthetics, and also erections. So think of Viagra, etc. That's what the focus of the brains of this epoch are on. Now, Blackbird mentioned King of the Hill. I don't know have you watched all the episodes of that, Blackbird?
Probably, I would think so, because it's in heavy syndication here in the States. So yeah. I've seen pretty much all of them, I think.
Right. I remember in the 90s when it came onto Irish TV. And a few years ago, I actually watched most of the episodes over many weeks. And it's quite degenerate when you think of it, because if you recall, in that series, you have a character called Dale Gribble. And he's a whatever, they're all working class white guys, as Blackbird said. But Dale Gribble, he's a conspirator, etc. He thinks the government's always spying on him. Maybe he's right, but anyway, he has a son, but it's an illegitimate son, and the son looks like an American Indian. And there's a guy called John Redcorn who's an Indian, and he's always calling in to Dale Gribble's house, especially when Dale isn't there and he's sleeping with Dale's wife. And you, as the audience, know that Dale Gribble's son is not his son, but rather John Redcorn's son. And this is a running joke throughout the series. Dale Gribble has it in his head that the boy is his son, etc. So yeah, there's a lot of that. And I do remember there was a character called Khan. He was Southeast Asian. And every time he spoke to the neighbors, he called them white trash. He called them hillbillies. He called them all sorts of names under the sun. And I guess, that was part and parcel of the programming, that other races could denigrate white people, but white people could never do the same to them. So now I have a few more points to make, and then I'll pass it back to Brizer. Yeah, this film, it starts off very much in a Darwinian style, survival of the fittest, and it talks about how humans, they're no longer being thinned out of the herd like in prehistoric times, and that now the dumbest are breeding and the smartest are not having kids. And we get an example. We have this couple. They're, I would say, middle class, upper middle class, and they're dillying and dallying about having a kid. It's just not the right time. Maybe in a few years' time, when the economy improves. So like they're very prudent, and intelligent people tend to be prudent. They tend to plan for the future. And then you get the other side of the equation, and obviously it can't be any other race except someone from the white race, working class, and it's the go-to character in all of Hollywood. Someone from the southern states, some working class guy from the southern states, what they would call a hick or a hillbilly, and he's got lots of kids, he's got grandkids, and you can see the chart. They're just like spreading like bacteria. This is the impression we get. So the smart couple will never have a kid, whereas the dummies, who would watch wrestling, probably believe wrestling is real and all this sort of stuff. They just spread like bacteria. You know that when the characters arrive in the future, they're going to be in a world inhabited by dumbasses. Something else I should say is the medical system, because when the characters arrive, the guy Joe Bowers, he arrives in the hospital, and the staff are like zombies. They just have this machine. It looks like a kind of play school toy, and it has little buttons with little pictograms or whatever. And they don't really know what they're doing, and nobody seems to know what they're doing. And I think people are finding this out as we go forward, that when you go to a hospital now in the West, if you go to a dentist, it's possible that you're going to come across more and more incompetent people. And you're really putting your life in your hands now. We have this preconceived notion that if you go to a hospital in the West, you'll be looked after, you'll get the best treatment. If your life is in danger, they'll save your life. But you could be actually putting your life in danger now, because we have people working in hospitals who can't read. We have people in hospitals who can barely, formulate a sentence. And these are people who are making big decisions. So I think that was something, certainly something I noticed when I watched this film yesterday. The legal system, we have a scene in a court, and it's like wrestling. It's like the Wrestling Federation. It's not a serious institution. It's just a lot of shouting, a lot of silliness. And we're starting to see this in the West. I'm starting to see videos on a regular basis of court cases where, defendants, whatever, are just charging at judges. There's pandemonium. There's all sorts of things going on. So we are seeing this obliteration of civilization. It's an ongoing process, but we're starting to see it. Now, getting back to the product, Brondo, there's a slogan. What is it? They say it's got electrolytes. Every time the product is mentioned, every person will say, it's got electrolytes. So they've been brainwashed to repeat the company's slogan. And when I was watching this, I was thinking of the scamdemic. And you had a lot of people who were suddenly, like I have to say, during the scamdemic, ordinary people, they suddenly had hundreds of new words. It was like overnight they absorbed, a few hundred new words into their lexicon. And suddenly they were just, if you listen to them speaking to each other, they were saying asymptomatic, asymptomatic, shedding. In Ireland, they were saying cocooning, as in the old people separating themselves from the rest of society, cocooning. And they were constantly talking about Pfizer, and they were constantly talking about Johnson & Johnson. And they were all experts. They were all experts on something that no one really had any idea of. It was just very silly. So now that's enough from me for the moment. I will now pass it back to Brizer.
Yeah, good points again. There's a lot of things in this movie which we're seeing now, and the dumbing down obviously is one of them, right? And at the beginning of this film, you can see how Okay, it's 2005, and you can see how society is deteriorating. It's going on a downward curve, and obviously this continues well into the future. And so we're now in this. So 500 years later, literally society has descended into an idiocracy. But there's all these things about, there is very much a kind of an anti-white sentiment in there. I agree with you there, Blackbird, because it makes kind of the dumb redneck in the South look like a complete idiot. And there's, they can hardly speak, and the kids are running around causing trouble and all that kind of stuff, And then there's the whole technocracy side of it as well, the corporatocracy, the hospital type stuff, the court stuff. There's a lot of all that, we could see that now. And, I thought the number one movie in America at that time was called Ass. And it was just people sitting at a cinema looking at a screen, and all they could see was a big ass, which farted, I think, quite a few times. And it lasted for 90 minutes, and it won 8 Oscars that year, including Best Screenplay. I thought, and I also, what occurred to me too was watching it was, I don't know if any of you guys have watched or seen that film, The Time Machine, which came out in the 60s, based on the H.G. Wells story, where the main guy he gets into his time machine and goes way, way, way into the future, and lands in what looks quite like a paradise, right? There's lots of fruit and everything all over the place, and then he comes across these people, and they're all blonde, blue-eyed, good-looking people, but they're so apathetic, because when one of the children falls into the river, they just let the child drown. And then he figures out that these people are just, again, completely dumb, really, and then you have the predators who are living underground. I think they're called the Morlocks, who come out of the caves every so often and pull a few of them in and have them for dinner, So, I think I could see some of that in this film. I never thought of that one before, but I thought that was, I think they got a lot of their ideas from that. But as I said, there's a lot of stuff that we are seeing now, and as you said, Betwixt, it was a good point you made about the whole scamdemic, how people latched onto these terms, as you said, cocooning or shedding, or your bubble, stay in your bubble, and we're all in this for the common good, the greater good, and we have to stand together, and nobody knew what was really going on at that time. Nobody stopped and questioned it. They just went along with it, and that's what you could see in this film. Everyone goes along with what's happening, and everyone agrees with everybody else. Yes, it's the electrolytes. It's all the electrolytes in the Brondo. That's it. And it's kind of scary when you think about it, because we are living in this kind of world now where I'd have to say, I don't know what percentage, but it's very high, of people who do not think at all about anything, do not question anything at all, just accept what they see on their idiot box or on their smartphone and go with it, and do not stop and think about what's actually going on here. And that's a very scary process, because and like, machines will do everything. You don't have to do anything. You'll get rewarded for doing nothing, for being a drain on society, and we see it all with the migrants now coming in. They're all getting free houses and free everything, and they're doing absolutely nothing. They're not contributing in any way, have nothing to contribute, right? And it's just being kind of accepted that this is just the way it is. And now there is pushback now. Obviously, that was going to kind of happen anyway. But the fact that it took that long for people to kind of realize that, hold on, something's not working out here. But again, I think the damage has been kind of being done now. And how do we fix this? Or can it be fixed? I don't know. I think for us now, the ones who are at least questioning stuff like this, we just have to find a way and survive and get through it somehow. And I think this will all implode naturally, if you will, nature will take its course, and whether it be some kind of huge war or catastrophe or earthquakes or whatever, I think this whole system that we're in will collapse on its own because it's just dumb. It's stupid. It doesn't make any sense, and we start again, and hopefully it'll be our phoenix that rises out of the ashes and not theirs. So I'll pass it on then to Blackbird.
Oh, great points. And I think one of the most cynical parts of this is in the soundtrack, where it's such a bleak future. It starts out with the trash avalanche that these Goyim just have created, this mountain of trash that they can no longer deal with, and it caused the great fall of civilization from the trash avalanche. And the whole time they're talking about this, you hear the 1950s song by Buck Owens and the Buckaroos called Buckaroo, which is this perky little happy, probably one of the most white bread songs ever written. And if you look at the band Buck Owens and the Buckaroos, they're about as white guys as you could possibly get. Southern, heritage, Scott-Irish guys. That this is what these Zionists completely hold in complete contempt. It's unfathomable that they hate us with every fiber of their being. And so to throw that song in there, and like, this is what your Goyim world is going to produce, have a nice day kind of song. It's just one of those tricks of cinema to, make a point. And I think the other thing was, the pressure on the hero, where he's, the president says, this is the smartest guy in the world. He's going to solve all of our problems in 1 week. And if he doesn't, we'll kill him. And when everything crashes and the market's down because they're actually using water on the plants, they decide to send him to rehabilitation, right? And you find out that rehabilitation is basically this monster truck gladiatorial type games of execution, where you basically have the convicted out being humiliated and killed as a spectator sport, and they call it rehabilitation. So it's just this complete contempt of Goyim law, the idea of constitutional law with a people that have individual rights. And so you have this person that says, the law is just for us. You guys get the 7 Noahide codes, but we have the 613 mitzvahs, and that's the only law that matters. And so just to see this complete contempt of the American legal system being reduced to this, and actually using the term rehabilitation to describe it, is just to me as cynical as using that Buck Owens song as part of the soundtrack. So back to you.
Yeah, I'll make a few more points. Getting back to Beavis and Butthead, I remember when I was a child, I was in a friend's house, and Beavis and Butthead came on the TV, and my friend and his siblings, they immediately sat down in front of the TV. They started watching it, and they were laughing. And I'd heard of Beavis and Butthead, but I'd never seen it until then. And I was kind of surprised, because I heard so much about it, and it just seemed really, really stupid. And I kind of stepped away from the TV, and I was sitting at the back of the room. And I remember my friend's father was sitting at the table, and he said to me, he said, that TV show is the biggest load of junk. And then he said, and if I had my way, it wouldn't be shown in my house. But obviously he'd lost against his kids, possibly his wife as well. Beavis and Butthead was there to stay. But I remember that he kind of saying to me that it was some sort of toxin, and brain dead Generation X TV material. There was a comedy in the 90s, and it was American. It's like all American comedy sitcoms. They all appeared on Irish TV, and one was called Married with Children. I found it excruciating anytime it came on and I happened to be in the room. But yet I knew lots of people who loved that show. And, about whatever 14 years ago or so, Brizer will know of this show. It's on Irish TV, called Mrs. Brown's Boys. I found that even more excruciating than Married with Children, because the laughter track they had twice as many laughter tracks, but yet everyone seemed to lap it up. And I remember speaking to someone, and they were saying how great it was, and did I not think it was great as well? And I said, actually, I thought it was crap. To which this person responded, well, I guess you'd have to have a sense of humor. I didn't have a sense of humor. I guess I didn't have a sense of humor when it came to that sitcom. So these sitcoms, for some of us, we might find them painful, but for most people, they do find them funny. And you two guys have mentioned in this film, like in the cinema, they pay money, they go into the cinema, and they're just sitting down looking at this giant arse on a screen that every so often farts, and they find it the funniest thing ever. And as Brizer said, and I was muted, but I laughed when he said it, that film, it even won the screenplay award, which I thought was quite, that's quite funny. But yeah, getting back to, I'll bring it up every now and then, the scamdemic. When you think about that, the scamdemic was a creation of the media. I mentioned this in previous recordings. It was a creation of the media. It didn't exist in the outside world. I never saw people collapsing on the streets during the pandemic. If there's a pandemic, I would expect to see bodies. I would expect to see people comatose on the street. Never saw it. In all the years of the worst pandemic ever, I never saw a single person lying on the street. Conscious, semi-conscious, or dead as a doornail. Didn't see it. And therefore, I believed what I saw with my own eyes, but yet the majority of people didn't believe what they saw with their own eyes. They believed what they were told. There was no pandemic, and yet the majority of people, it seems, they got injected 10, 11, 12 times with a mystery juice because the media told them there was a pandemic, and they told them it was the right thing to do. And as Brizer said earlier, do it for the common good. Do it for the common good. I've noticed it's something recent I've picked up on. When I go to the supermarket, when you go to the till, you're waiting to, scan your products or get them scanned. In my case, get them scanned. Well, you have someone in front of you with their goods, and then you're behind them. And, you have the dividers on the conveyor belt. The dividers, generally, they're supposed to be what? Perpendicular or whatever to the conveyor belt, but now they throw them, even the cashier will throw it in a parallel way, which means it doesn't divide. Products between two customers get mixed up. I see customers at the till and they don't seem to know how to use the divider. They just leave it to the side because they're not sure how to use it. And you see them trying to hold, as the conveyor belt is moving, they're trying to hold their products from mingling with the products in front of them or whatever. So this is something I've only noticed in the last few months. I find it quite disturbing, and I find it disturbing that the cashier will even throw it pell-mell. They won't put it in the correct way on the conveyor belt to separate the goods. Basic arithmetic is out the window. You go now, I always pay in cash. A lot of people seem to have problems when it comes to counting coins. Sometimes it takes them 2 or 3 times to give me the change. Many times the change will be incorrect. I've noticed that, as things become more complicated with recycling and all this, you've got so many different containers now out in the street that people are overwhelmed. And what do? They just throw a bag of rubbish on the street because they don't know which bin to throw it into. I will now pass it back on to Brizer.
Yeah. Good points there, all right. I know what you mean about the supermarket and those dividers. Yeah, you see a lot of confusion there. And again, it's taking out that card or your phone and tapping. It's so convenient than counting out these coins and do you have the correct amount of money to pay for whatever, And it is interesting. Like again, the last 3 or 4 years for me, kind of. I mean, I knew we all had a good idea where this was all going anyway, even before this whole scamdemic broke out. We could see that society was getting dumber as it went on, and but in the last 3 or 4 years, it was jaw-dropping to me in many respects to look at people going along with this and without questioning it at all, and masking up and doing what they thought was the right thing. We got to protect Granny and the children, and we have to keep ourselves safe and all this kind of stuff, and it's that really is a sign of idiocy. That's a sign of dumbing down, and it's all that brainwashing. You say the TV and whatever, it's done its job, hasn't it? It's been around since what, the 50s, I suppose. In Ireland, it didn't really come in. TV didn't arrive till about the 60s, I think. And but everyone sat around this box which put out whatever, and of course they put out the advertising. This is getting people to buy stuff and all the rest of it, and it was all, everyone used the catchphrases of the ads, and I agree with you on that one as well. Betwixt that the series that was on Irish TV and called Mrs. Brown's Boys, I could not bear watching that. I thought it was absolutely ridiculous. I didn't find anything funny about it, but everyone around me was breaking their what's laughing at it. I was like, what the hell? And you could see this, and you can see it also with comedy down through the years. When you look back at the comedy from, let's say, the 50s and 60s, like Monty Python and all these guys, it was very clever, and it was good, and there was a lot of thought behind it, and it was very satirical, and you kind of had to think about it a bit, But it was very, very good. Comedy these days is nothing, and it's the same with music as well. Music back when I was growing up was great. I mean, I loved it all. Like, okay, you can all say that was part of the whole programming thing anyway, get people into, pop music, popular culture, all of that. But at least the music back then was good, and you could listen to it. And I used to buy loads and loads of albums, and I was big into all that type of thing, But looking at the music now, I mean, well, I wouldn't call it music. It's just noise. Now, we can say, oh, you're just getting old, and you're not with it, man, get with it. No, I don't have to get with this at all. And I think there's a lot of young people as well looking at this, what's called music now, and they don't, they don't want anything to do with it either. So it's just, yeah, it's funny, like, as you said, to compare what's going on in this film and what we're seeing now. I mean, it was kind of prophetic in a way. And again, Hollywood does that. And we talked about in the last one, Wag the Dog, where that movie was made back in 1998, right? And it was telling us like how the media can create a story which is totally fictional, and everyone will believe it. And again, that's a sign of stupidity, isn't it? Because surely you should say, well, okay, you're saying this has happened. Show me the proof. You show me proof of claim. You're making a claim that this is going on. Show me the evidence. And if you can show me the evidence, I believe you. But they never show the evidence, ever. But you're still expected to believe it. And if you do question it, well, you're a denier. Shut him up, lock him up, as we're seeing now to many people, for saying things they shouldn't be saying, for breaking community guidelines, right? Not law, breaking community guidelines. We don't like this in our society, this communitarian society, where we're all in this together, and people don't realize that the actual enemy out there is not really them. They're just creating a society for us to live in, which is completely bonkers, and people are buying into it, So we have to acknowledge this and realize that in many ways, we're our own worst enemies, and we have to find a way out of this and break away from it. And yes, we've all got pulled into it, because it's very seductive, it's very tempting, and we all like it. We all like our gadgets and our stuff. But there's times when we just have to say, right, that's all it is stuff, you know. Like a thing on little saying that I have, I put it up on my Skype there. It's just on, you know, the most important things in life are not things. And that's what people want, are things. But what, you know, I always notice, like with young kids when they get Christmas presents and it's all, you know, toys and whatever, and it's all excitement and it's great. 6 months later, those toys are thrown into a back room somewhere, gathering dust. You know, it only lasts so long. It's just get a bit of pleasure for 5-10 minutes. Get those what do they call it? The dopamine going. You know, and people just get that pleasure from one thing to the next, and so, as I say, logical thinking, reasoning, all of that goes out the window. And as I said, you know, I don't know where we're going to be in 500 years' time, okay? Well, the world's been here a long, long time, right? So I'm sure the world will be here, but what kind of a society would be in? But if things go on like we are now, okay, we will be in an idiocracy, I think, a lot sooner than 500 years. So, yeah, pass it on now to Blackbird.
Oh, great points. And getting back to the COVID madness, you know, what this group of slime mold that moved into Watauga County after 9/11 and took over the place, both the university and just the town in general, you know, they were out there pushing the propaganda nonstop about social distancing, wearing your mask, the vaccines are safe and effective, and the chancellor, Appalachian State University chancellor Jezebel Everett, they've had her up like this queen, a savior that was going to lead us through this pandemic, and she was out there, you know, doing PSAs every hour about the Appalachian State University community, you know, the mountaineer community. We're going to come together for the common good. And you know, she mandated all the faculty, all the students, all the instructors at App State had to get vaccinated. But now we found out there were a lot of exceptions to the rules. But you know, had the town locked down, masks you had to wear. We were going out of town, sometimes out of state, to buy supplies because we were protesting the mask mandate. So we refused to go into these stores wearing masks that were completely ineffective. But it's just that conditioning. And the same thing with this, you know, Adams Publishing out-of-state newspaper that bought up all the media up here. You know, they would not let anybody say anything different than what the CDC were saying, right? And so it's just this big propaganda bubble. And last time we talked about, you know, some of the psychological research that was being done on the Goyim by these Jewish supremacists in the 50s and 60s. And one of the big ones was the Solomon Asch group conformity experiments, and the other was the Stanley Milgram defer to authority experiments. And, you know, Solomon Asch concluded that with a given demographic, he could gaslight 74% of the people if he had complete control of the echo chamber, that no other information got in except for what they wanted in. He could gaslight up to 74% of that bell curve and make them believe whatever they wanted them to believe, right? But if one truth advocate entered the equation, you know, just one person telling the truth and challenging the authority, that number would go from 74% to less than 5%. So that's how quickly truth will win if it gets a fair shot. And this is one of the reasons why it was so important to them to shut people like me down. That, you know, like, I'm a local. This is insane. This is not how science works. These are not vaccines. These are more likely bioweapons. And we promptly all got censored and shut down, taken off social media, etc. And of course, like I said, I got, you know, banned from my own local newspaper. All the high country press, the Adams Publishing, Watauga Democrat, Appalachian State had my Twitter account taken down, right, under Jack Dorsey. And it was because the locals were trying to say this is not right. We need to think about this before you tell everybody to get this jab. Now we've got sudden death rates, excessive death rates out the wazoo, and nobody talks about that. It's like, why are all these old white people up here in these mountains dying suddenly, in record numbers? Oh, it couldn't have anything to do with all those, clot shot Jew jabs we made them take to be able to take part in society. Now they're saying, well, nobody ever forced you to take the jab, right? And, so when I look at that bell curve, I think of the, Arthur Schopenhauer's famous quote where he says, the majority of men are not capable of thinking, but only believing, and are not accessible to reason, but only to authority. So the majority of men are not capable of thinking, but only believing, and are not accessible to reason, but only to authority. So, also, Samuel Clemens, I think said, it's impossible to convince somebody. It's easier to fool people than convince them they have been fooled, right? And it's that, once the bad information's in there and the people believe it that first time, no matter how much evidence and facts you give them, the majority will still stick to the original thing, no matter how inaccurate it may be. And so we still have people up here wearing masks, right? Because they think they're being good to the community and, doing their part. And it's just the psychoses of an idiocracy. It's like, we're going to go along to get along. And anybody who tries to advocate for us, we're going to throw them into the gladiatorial ring and I'll cheer while they get destroyed. The heretics must die because we have to have our nice little, echo bubble where everybody believes the same thing, whether it be true or not. So I guess that's my wrap up there. So back to you.
All right. I heard a while ago that there's some sort of experiment whereby you have a group of people in a room and they've already planned it out that they're going to select a color. Maybe they'll say red, but they'll all admit that it's blue. They'll all say it's blue, even though it's red. So maybe it's, I don't know, a red book or something, and they'll say it's a blue book. And then someone will arrive late, the unsuspecting victim, and they'll say, maybe one of the guys will say, oh, here's a blue book for you. And he'll say, what are you talking about? It's a red book. But then someone else will say, what are you talking about? It's a blue book. And then everyone, maybe you've got 20 people all saying it's a blue book. And this individual, depending on who he is, but he will eventually come to the conclusion that I must be wrong and they must be right because they're the majority. And during the scamdemic, I heard this word a lot. I thought it summed it up very well. Lockstep. There was no escaping the onslaught of the media scamdemic. On the internet, if you went to Google Maps, it had areas on the map where COVID was high. So maybe, depending on whether you were on lockdown or not, but maybe if you could get out to go for a hike or something or a trek, you wanted to, plot out your track, and you'll be bombarded with different areas, different colors, etc., warnings about the COVID in certain local areas. You went on to YouTube, obviously no surprise there, but the first pane of videos was all about COVID, and it was like that for a number of years. It never moved. The latest updates on COVID. You went outside, and as you guys mentioned, people were wearing masks, and the mask, it was just to advertise. It was to advertise the scamdemic. It wasn't about protecting people or whatever. It was to make people believe even more that there was, a pandemic. Brizer mentioned music, and I noticed that with modern music now, if I'm in a cafe or something and it's all this kind of jungle music, it's like you have three different tracks. You might have a track from the 80s, maybe a track from the 90s, or maybe just two tracks from early 90s and one from the late 90s. And then over that, you have this kind of rap reggaeton thing going on. Because the rap reggaeton on its own, it's not music, it's just not music. So they have to kind of tie it to some other music. And a lot of young people actually, they realize that modern music is crap. And so a lot of young people now are listening to music from the 70s, from the 60s, from the 80s, etc. Because they realize their music, the music of their time, isn't really music. Brizer mentioned how he also didn't like Mrs. Brown's Boys and how people would be laughing. Like, I remember as well that if people realize that you're not laughing at what they're laughing at, they can suddenly become very angry with you. They can be very offended that you're not laughing. And Blackbird, you said at the very start about Joe Bowers. He's the only guy, well, apart from Rita, he's the only person without a barcode on his wrist. And the people, the other personalities, etc., they're absolutely shocked when they realize he doesn't have this barcode. And you can see they kind of step back from him as if he's some sort of monster. He doesn't have this barcode on his wrist, this tattoo on his wrist. And finally, what do I want to say? Yeah, young people, I've noticed this. Children, even children, if you ask them, and let's not say during the week, let's say a weekend, it's the weekend, because during the week, every day is the same for them. They go to school, they come back from school. But let's say you're speaking to them on Sunday and you ask them what they did yesterday. Some kids now have no idea. They can't remember what they did yesterday. Other kids will have to think for possibly up to a minute. They'll have to try and think, and then they'll tell you. So there's something going on with memory. It's not normal for kids, especially, to not remember what they did the day before. Because when you're a kid, a day is like an eternity. So I find this very perplexing, that even young people, children, seem to have memory problems now. So I'm going to head away for a few minutes. I will hand it back to Brizer, and then at the very end, I'll get you guys to let the people listening know where they can find you.
Yeah, good points there. Yeah, and it's true about the children. I've got a niece who unfortunately went into the teaching profession, and I warned my brother, who, the father. I said, that's not a good place for her to go, because it's not teaching, it's brainwashing. But anyway, besides that, but she was telling me, because of this, so the lockdowns and all this stuff that happened, kids are normally going to school at 5, whatever, and they learn basic things when they're 5 and whatever. And they went back when everything opened up again, and they went back to school. They were now 8 years old, and they don't know how to put on their coat properly. They need assistance putting on their coats at 8 years old. Kids normally were able to tie their shoelaces at 4 or 5. They got dressed. They knew how to get dressed. They knew what sock, what foot, what sock went on with what foot, what shoe, all that kind of stuff. But they are actually having problems with that now. And that's kind of idiocracy, because those kids have lost those couple of years, which is a very vital part of their growing up, because they're supposed to be learning, they're supposed to be questioning. And I always remember kids, when before the school indoctrination really hits in, they're always asking questions like, what is that? What does that do? Why does that work? Whatever, they're always bugging you with questions. And then it came to when 11 or 12 years old, when, kind of hitting puberty, they stop asking questions and they just go along with the herd. But that's a very vital time in life, that between 5 and 8 years old, when they're questioning their whole reality. What is this? What does this do? How does this work? Whatever. And it's very sad that it's kind of, that's like the whole generation of children who've missed out. And what were they doing while they were not at school, while they were at home? And I see a lot of kids now that young, and they got these smartphones stuck in their hands, and that's all they're looking at. They're just looking at that and laughing at absolute nonsense, you know. But when they get a like on Facebook or whatever, it's all, oh, look at this, you know. The dopamine kind of hits in, you know, and it's kind of scary. I mean, I don't know. Are we in some kind of an apocalyptic type of situation? Are we moving into that? Are we at an end of a cycle where humanity has progressed so much down through the centuries, like what we have now? Like, went from 200 years ago, it was a horse and cart, a horse and buggy, and now we have all this incredible technology. It all happened so quickly, and everybody wants to have the latest gadget and all the rest of it. And okay, it does bring obviously benefits because it can help out in a lot of ways, but the downside, I think, is even worse, because I'm just seeing people just wanting, again, just the latest thing. What's, you know, the latest thing, and they put a bit of energy into that, and then they forget that, and they want the next thing. It's always the next thing. And I saw there, you know, the very day the scandemic ended, we had the Russia-Ukraine thing, and then the next thing we had Ukraine flags flying all over the place, you know. And people just want something to attach themselves to, because they feel worthless, I suppose, or they're being made to feel worthless. But again, you know, a lot of it's probably down to parenting, but it's the society that's being built up around us, and we've all kind of bought into it. Most of us have, anyway. I'm glad to see there's a lot of people kind of questioning a lot of stuff now and pushing back. That's a good sign, and I hope it continues. Whether it's too late now in the day, I don't know. We just have to wait and see on that. But at least it kind of restores a little bit of faith in humanity, that there is at least some kind of intelligence still left there, or there's still some kind of a spiritual thing within people where something inside them says, no, this is wrong. I can't go along with this. And again, I've seen this from people who've taken the jabs and whatever and totally regretted it. And you know, I know 4 or 5 people who a couple of years ago thought I was nuts. You know, you're a threat. You know, well, they didn't say that, but kind of perceived me as a threat because I didn't go along with the current thing. Now coming around and saying you were right. You know, now I don't want the pat on the back. Maybe this is what's needed. They needed a kick up the ass to get them to think differently. But look at the price they've had to pay. They got injected with a poison. Like, okay, they're still around. We don't know the long-term effects of this, or maybe it was a placebo and it was totally harmless. And if that's the way it was, well, that's good. But we still don't know. But as Blackbird was saying, the excess deaths are going through the roof, and nobody's asking any questions about this. But they're beginning to now. I think they're beginning to do it now, and I'm seeing some good things happening. And it as I said, it restores a bit of faith that what we've been kind of vindicated in a way, because we had to go through pretty dark times ourselves to even look at what's going on around us. And thinking, God, what are we? We're done here. We're doomed, really, in many ways. You know, I tried not to think about that, but it was many times I actually had to think, we're gone here if we continue like this. But at least there is a kind of pushback now, and there might be a turnaround, but whether that'll last long enough, because the so-called powers that be, man, they're just going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and. But that might work against them and might work in our favor. So we just have to see where it goes. But I do think we're in some kind of apocalyptic times, and I think we're coming to an end of a cycle where this whole system, which can work, but the negatives totally outweigh the positives, and it's going to have to collapse. Like the whole banking system is a wreck, the legal system is a wreck. The whole this corporatocracy it hasn't served anybody except this super rich, and so we have to now realize that this will have to come to a natural end, and I think nature will take its course as it normally does, and that's why I think it's important for us to stay strong through this. And instead of kind of blaming others, we kind of have to look at ourselves and try and survive and weave our way through this, and hopefully come out the other side where we can start again and do it right next time. So I think that's where we are. That's where we are as society right now, and it's going to take a lot of big choices that we all have to make, and we have to kind of maybe just step away from this a lot. I'm doing that myself. I'm just trying to, one step at a time, step away from this and not be a part of it anymore, because it's dangerous. It's not good for your health. It's not good for your mind. Or your soul or anything. It's not good for us. So the best way, I think, is just to step away, start taking responsibility for your own life. Be sovereign, so to speak. Be the king of your own little kingdom, which is your body, your mind, your soul, and take control, take back control, and then life can become bearable. But if people carry on the way they're going at the moment, it's not going to end well. It's simple as that. But I'm seeing little green shoots coming out now, which is good, and we kind of have to help that along and just see where it goes. So, okay, I'll pass it over to Blackbird.
Oh, great points. And for those not familiar with my work here at the Trading Post, we do a lot of elder care, and especially elder care work with Alzheimer's and dementia. And so I've done a lot of research over the years about, why do we have this plague of Alzheimer's and dementia in our elders? Why do we have this plague of autism in our youth? And, you're talking about memory problems, both short-term and long-term memory. And one of the things that I'm always struck by is the H.G. Wells book of The Shape of Things to Come that he wrote in 1933, and it's set in a history of 2106, right? But it ends there, but it goes through this whole thing of the New World Order kicking in, and most people I've read Brave New World by Huxley and 1984 by Orwell, but not as many people have read The Shape of Things to Come by H.G. Wells or seen the Hollywood movie they did 3 years later. But one of the main parts of the Great War, and this is in the run-up to World War II, right, that would destroy the old civilization so the New World Order could rise from it, was this wandering sickness. The plague caused the wandering sickness where people would just forget who they are. They had no skills. They were completely, dependent. They could not fend for themselves. And we see this in this incredible plague of Alzheimer's and dementia in our elders. And one of the things about fifth generation warfare is, you don't kill your enemies, you wound them, because your enemy has to use so much resource to keep a wounded person going. Whereas if you just kill them, then they just bury them and they're back to the war, right? And so I have seen so many families that have just been shut down because of this necessity of caring for a dependent child or a dependent parent that can no longer take care of themselves. And then the anguish of having to put that person into some kind of facility and away from the family. And in the process, you usually end up losing the family farm, the family business, the family house, the family vehicles to pay for it, right? So it's this whole racket of sucking off the wealth under the guise of healthcare of something that is most likely synthetic, both vaccines, fluoride in the water, heavy metals in everything. Every week there's a new expose about some popular Jewish-owned corporation has a product that has heavy metals in it that's causing brain damage. You know, child's formula has lead in it. And also, you know, not to go total tinfoil hat, but my concern has always been about what are they spraying in these chemtrails? You know, is it weather modification? Is that part of it? Or are we looking at aluminum, barium, heavy metal compounds specifically designed to be inhaled and to latch into that part of the brain that deals with, you know, short-term, long-term memory and reasoning skills? And, you know, from, you know, my perspective, you know, nothing was as heartbreaking as the first time I went to see my mother and she did not recognize me, right? And that is a heartbreak that I wish no one ever has to go through. But that is the reality when, you know, a loved one no longer remembers who they are or who you are, right? And you look at these white coats of Baphomet, as I call them, and because my mother had perfect insurance from all my father's retirement, etc., you know, she was fully vaccinated, all her flu shots and COVID shots, etc., and she died suddenly after the COVID shot. But up to then, you know, I maintain that she was damaged with all these vaccines that were being forced upon her. So that's just, you know, some of my thoughts. So back to you.
Yeah, a number of people are reporting similar cases, Blackbird, about loved ones very quickly expiring after having been administered with a jab, possibly not their first jab either. Yeah, it's so interesting that both you guys have referenced H.G. Wells, and Brizer earlier mentioned The Time Machine. I'm actually reading that at the moment, and today I was reading the part where the protagonist arrives in the future and all these, you know, these people, he doesn't even describe them as people, but they come over to him and they're like touching him because they know he's like a complete stranger to their world. And then they try to start probing the time machine, and he has to try and warn them off the time machine because he's worried that if they pull the lever, they'll send him or all of them into another or even further into the future. But in that part of the novel, he mentions, you know, that he thinks they're adorable and they're kind of fragile. He says they're childlike, and he says he could throw them like bowling pins. He's talking about them as though they were, you know, little monkeys, kind of, you know. But the thing is, at one stage, he looks into their eyes, and this Brizer mentioned this at you know, close to the very start of this recording, where he said they let someone drown and they didn't try to help. That cognition isn't there. He looks into their eyes and he realizes that there's not much going on there. You know, there's not much going on. The fluoride stare, as it were. Anyway, guys, we'll wrap this up. I want to thank Brizer and Blackbird for coming on. I've enjoyed this. If people are listening to this, share it around on whatever, Telegram, Twitter, etc. Hit the like. It might make it trend, although I doubt it. I will say that links for Brizer and Blackbird's Twitter, etc. I think in the case of Blackbird, you also have a Gab, will be in the description of this video. So I leave you guys with the final words. I'll start off with Brizer and then Blackbird.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. So we didn't really kind of review the movie too much, but it's one of those ones that it's difficult because there's lots of different things going on and there's lots of humorous moments in it. Mark's at a 10. I'll give it about a 6.5. I think it is very funny, and there is a definite message in there. So I would recommend people go and watch it, particularly normies. Get the normies watching that and say, this is the future, guys, if we continue down this road. I mean, okay, it's a comedy, it's satire, all the rest of it, but look around you now. So I enjoyed it, and yeah, I would recommend it. And you know, we're doing these movie reviews, and I was watching an interview a guy did. He's been interviewed by this woman, and he was talking about how he's one of these kind of life coaches. Like, I don't really listen to them too much, but because some of them are full of it. But this guy made a lot of sense. He said, our own lives. Think of your own life as it's your own movie. And you're the producer, you're the director, and you're the main actor, and you're in total control. So you don't allow any other actors or any other producers in, right? It's your life, and live according to that. And I think that's very good. That's a very good way of thinking. You know, it's kind of, again, taking ownership of everything, taking back control, taking responsibility for your own life and your own destiny. And if you know what's going on out there, okay, I think the three of us around here know that. We have a very good idea of it. We know a lot. It's most of it is bullshit. Okay, so once you know that, you can't unknow it. We think, well, I've got to take another step here. I've got to move away from this and do my own thing and live in my kind of movie, so to speak. But it's reality. But you'll find that the stress and all the nonsense that's gone out there, because I think it does affect an awful lot of people in the truth or nationalist kind of community like that. They do get affected by this, and it is very depressing, and that's harmful to us all because we get caught up in it too much, in the minutiae of it all, and like what's going on over here, what's going on over there. And we don't even know how true it all is. Even we don't know because we're not there. But you know, from what you can see around you, at least you can see that wherever you live, that something's not right here at all. And just don't buy into it anymore. And I think that's where we kind of need to go. I think we need to take that brave step, a leap of faith, so to speak, and do our own thing. And when other people see you doing that, they'll follow your example. So, you know, we don't particularly need a leader. We don't need a Donald Trump to come and save us or anybody else to come and save us. We can be our own leader and lead by example. And, you know, maybe we can turn this around. I don't know. But I really do think that it's going to get a lot worse. And I think the system will collapse at some point, but it will be for our benefit in general, because I think humanity, we've been here for, well, we don't know how long we've been here for, but quite a long time, right? And we've gone through all sorts of scenarios, wars, catastrophes, you name it, and we're still here. And I think we'll get through this one as well. So that's my final thoughts. So over to Blackbird.
Oh, great summation, and I thoroughly have enjoyed this. Time just flew by. I guess as a necessity of watching this, just to see how much contempt the directors and writers and producers of this film have for you, I think you should watch it. So I give it an 8. It's just required viewing of, like I said at the beginning of the show, the Kalergi plan and the Cloward-Piven plan, you know, extrapolate it to in-game scenario. You know, this is what they want, and is that the future we want? And, you know, this total dystopia coming out of Hollywood that, you know, projects that we have to have a dystopian future, that was actually developed in the Kalergi school about the same time that they were developing, you know, the Kalergi plan. It's like in the 20s, and it was this idea of not only critical theory of just pick at everything, tear down their history, tear down what they believe of themselves. Anytime you see something negative, be sure to amplify that, make people, no longer proud of their people, no longer proud of their history, no longer proud of themselves. This is what the Beat generation was really all about, is beating them down through constant criticism. This is what kvetching is. It's just that constant conflict and negative analysis of everything you've done and where the future is. So this idea of a pessimistic, nihilistic future, that was designed in the Frankfurt School to be weaponized to demoralize the youth of the West into thinking it's a hopeless cause and the best thing for Western civilization to do is to just lay down and die. And I think that's been very effective. In my generation, just how much we were bombarded with this dystopian future of futility, that we're overcrowded, we're all going to die in a nuclear war, etc. I was a Cold War baby, that the big one's going to drop any minute, right? And we were encouraged not to have families, that, the planet's overpopulated. And so in a lot of ways, so many of us were like the couple at the beginning of the film where it's not a good time to have children, bring children into this. Whereas all these, low IQ non-whites were just breeding like cockroaches, right? And so it's that replacement population because the whites feel that, it's too painful a world to bring children into. And so this cynical view of the future, I think, is what we really have to combat, and to bring that optimism into focus again, that yes, we can have a positive future. We can solve our problems, but we have to acknowledge that we have a faction that is at war with us and wants us gone, that this is an existential battle. And we need to get our heads in the game if we're going to have a future for, white European people around the planet. So I guess that's my view of this dystopian idiocracy, is it need not be this. And we need to address that now and say we don't want this future. We refuse this future. We want something positive. And to adopt that and to reject this Frankfurt School cynicism, which is nothing but a demoralizing psyop. But thank you again, gentlemen, for having me. I enjoyed it.